what we wanted to do now is actually share the results of the research, the key findings of this research that we did over this with FinStep Asia, that included a very strong team, Mushir as well as Yosha. Yosha, as Kirill mentioned, is a senior advisor to FinStep, is also founder of Mimerikai, a social enterprise driving financial inclusion for marginalized artisans and arts by empowering them with technology and creating new opportunities for them. So welcome, Yosha. It's really a huge pleasure to have you.
Likewise, it's awesome to be
here. Great. So listen, let's start by going through. We do have some slides. So slide 1, please. So let me start by asking you, why now? Why this research is so important at this moment?
I think thank you Ines for entrusting us with this really important piece of research. Actually, it's been absolutely enriching working on this. And the last conversation, I think highlighted really clearly the why now. But to reiterate, you see, the opportunity of the female market is huge. There's $216 trillion controlled by the female economy, and every year $24 trillion as income being earned as well, right? So clearly the opportunity is huge. And we heard about the dissatisfaction as well, the underserved, how women are underserved as well, that 65% of women, receive financial services compared to 72% of men. And of them who receive financial services, more than 70% are dissatisfied with it. So clearly there's, the gap which needs to be filled as well. But picking up from the last conversation about why now, the fact that we now need to build sustainable, resilient economies, it highlights the need for why now even more clearly. And, hence this research. And we hope, as Swapnindu said, that a lot of people can benefit from this research. And this highlights the focus that needs to be there on the female economy. And to tell you a little bit about who we researched in this report, we did about 168. Yeah, so we did a combination of qualitative and quantitative research with fintech founders, with VCs, with stakeholders of the ecosystem, financial service providers. So over 168 fintechs, both B2B and B2C fintechs, and across fintech segments, right from credit and lending, payments, across all the different fintech segments, and more than 30 VCs and stakeholders and financial service providers, and all of them covered more than 43 countries overall. So yeah, clearly a very representative data set across the fintech industry all over the world. And we'll start sharing some more details about the study, but that gives you a sort of idea about the overall sample set.
Okay, so that is slide 2. So we did both qual and quant, and we got 168 fintechs. Okay, let's go through the main findings, please.
Yeah. So I think the most important finding was the fact that there's a very compelling business case for targeting the female economy. What we found is that the fintechs who are actually sex disaggregating their data, they can very clearly see that there's a very compelling business case. And let's break down what that business case means. If we look at anything right from usage ratios, that the percentage of female customers who use services of these fintechs more than male customers, 64% fintechs actually said who have access to the sex disaggregated data actually said that female customers use services more than male customers. And then going down further into what are the other important KPIs like customer acquisition cost. If you look at customer acquisition cost, 95% of the fintechs who had access to this sex disaggregated customer acquisition cost actually said that it's similar or lower for female customers, right? Then the next KPI, which would be LTV, lifetime value of customers, again, the ones who had access to sex disaggregated data, of them, 86% actually said that LTV is either higher or the same for female customers compared to male customers, and of which 43% actually said that it's higher for female customers, right? So if you put all this together, like the LTV and the CAC, and especially in the fintech industry and the startup industry, this ratio is quite a critical ratio of LTV to CAC. If we could go back to the previous slide, please. The fact that LTV for female customers is similar or higher, and the CAC is similar or lower, clearly means that it makes good business sense to target female customers, right? So you clearly see a very compelling business case for targeting the female economy from the fintechs who are actually sex disaggregating their data. That said, if we can go to the next slide, the fact also is that not enough fintechs are sex disaggregating their data, and that clearly leaves, that leads to a lot of, not having enough understanding about the women's market. And if we look at the metrics, you'll see that in this funnel, there's clearly a fall at every level, that not very few fintechs are actually looking at the total addressable market in a gender disaggregated way, which right from the beginning itself, it leaves an important point that if we don't know the entire value of the female economy, if we don't know the opportunity of the female economy, then we're not going to go about targeting it in the first place, right? So gender disaggregated TAM, not enough fintechs disaggregating it. And like I said, the other KPIs as well, it keeps dropping off at every level. That while fintechs might, the good thing is at least 70% or more fintechs actually know the gender of their users, but they're not then using the gender of those users to look at the other KPIs like LTV and CAC and usage ratios, which if they did would clearly shine the light, like we saw in the case of the data for fintechs who are sex disaggregating it, that the business case is really clear. So yes, a lot of room for improvement in terms of actually sex disaggregating the data.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, and I think some of those business case figures really resonate with the incumbents, where we're seeing products per customer really go up for women, because if they're treated well and they totally respect, with respect, and they trust the institution in the sense that they are the chief purchasing officers in the household. So once you get them, they do buy more because they're catering for their children and for their elderly parents, etc. So that kind of CAC to LTV ratio looks like it's very promising in fintech. It would mirror actually what's happening in the incumbent sector. Okay, moving on with this data issue, why do you think there's this lack of focus on it? I know we explored that quite a bit in the research. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Yeah. So I think the idea, the fact that we're not gender disaggregating the data, most of the fintechs, a very large proportion of the fintechs, it first starts boiling down right from the fact, as I mentioned, from the TAM, the total addressable market. If you're not looking at the value of the female economy, we're not going to focus on it, in the next stages of product development of the business as well. And the thing is that this myopia starts creeping it in undetected ways, and it starts becoming a bias in different ways, right? And if we sort of if we take an attempt at classifying what these different kind of biases can be, something as simple as, like I said, that if we don't have sex disaggregated data, there's a lot of myths in the market, in the fintechs as well as the financial institutions. Like the Alliance already has done a lot of research earlier about that the female that women and they don't use products enough, the adoption rates are lower. And I would say that as a previous fintech founder, if I bring in my own personal experience, I've been guilty of that as well, that I actually thought that the early adopters for my product were male customers, and I kept adapting the product further to cater to male customers, not realizing that the initial marketing that we had done was on channels which targeted male customers, and hence, our early adopters ended up being that. So, something like this can clearly become like a usage bias in our overall business. So these are the kind of things that fintechs need to be really careful about, and hence we tried classifying this into different kinds of biases which can creep in. For example, a team composition bias. But in our survey, we found that while most fintechs at least have gender balanced teams overall, but when it comes to founders, again, very few female founders for fintechs. When it comes to technology and product roles, less than 25% of technology and product roles are actually women. So all of that then starts creeping into design and overall how the products are being designed, and it leaves a lot of room for designing products better for female customers. So that's just to highlight some of the biases which can start creeping in.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think later we're going to have a whole panel on data bias, because it takes many forms, and the whole issue of rooting it out now while we're developing those algorithms, etc., is hugely important. Okay, so moving on. So tell us a little bit about what we found in terms of how to make fintechs or encourage them. Or give them tips, let's say, to how to be more gender intelligent.
Yeah. So I think we heard a little bit about that in the previous conversation as well. But if we had to think of a framework around it, right, that what does a gender intelligent product design process look like, and what does gender intelligent marketing look like, and together how all of that can lead to gender intelligent products. I think, let's start from the gender intelligent product design process. So for example, right, like I said in the very beginning, how do we make sure that we're looking at gender disaggregated TAM? How do we make sure that we're actually understanding what are the differences in the requirements between men and women for financial services? And the Alliance has done a lot of research for this earlier as well. There's a fabulous report about the myth of gender neutral banking, and a lot of focus and research there on what women actually want from financial services, right? So doing all of that kind of market research. So TAM, market research, then making sure that when we are designing our products, we're it's not just like I said, not a gender neutral product, but we're actually catering to the real requirements of women customers, their real life moments. How can fintechs actually solve for those pain points is actually all being catered to as well in that process. And from that, and we can take examples here from because of all the fintechs we interviewed. There's so many fintechs who are already doing such a great job in designing products better for women. Especially, there's a lot of fintechs which are founded by female founders and are catering to female customers as well. And we'll hear from some of them, like in wealth tech, for example. There's Basis in India, there's Elvest we heard from already yesterday, there's FinMarie in Europe, which are designing wealth tech products which are very specifically catering to women. And if we just take a small example, that the fact that women actually have longer lifespans, the gender pay gap is a reality for women have to take career breaks, all of that adds up to the fact that we need to design the wealth tech solutions differently for women, right? So small changes like this in the overall product design process. So TAM, market research, making sure that the product design process is designed taking holistic requirements of women in mind, making sure we're capturing gender as a variable, right? While we saw that about 70% of fintechs actually at least have access to the gender of the user, but there are still 30% who don't, right? So why is it that they're not even capturing the gender of the users? And some of it boils down to the fact that if they're B2B fintechs, maybe in their partnership agreements with the financial institutions, they don't have access to gender. Or sometimes fintechs say that, the sign-up process is just as simple as taking an email, and hence they never have the gender of the user. So these are things which, again, fintechs can be conscious about and make sure that it's captured as a variable, because the moment it's captured as a variable is when, it can start informing all the other KPIs like LTV, like CAC, usage ratios, and helps build the overall business case, helps us understand where is it that we're not being able to target women customers effectively, right? So that's about the gender intelligent product design process. And then when it comes to gender intelligent marketing, right, that becomes really important as well, because we've designed a good product. Now, how do we make sure we're marketing it correctly to female customers? And here again, there's a lot of research from the Alliance that women, and with Alliance member banks, that women actually do feel that they have lower levels of financial literacy, that they have less business confidence, they have smaller networks, that they need more mentorship, right? So all of this becomes part of the non-financial services, and we heard about non-financial services a lot yesterday. So the good thing is that fintechs have started incorporating non-financial services into their overall holistic product design, but a lot more needs to be done in that space in terms of overall gender intelligent marketing. And making sure that it's not just pink marketing, it's not just about providing UI and UX changes, but speaking in the in a tone that we as women customers can actually understand. That's super important as well. So in terms of the framework, it becomes about gender intelligent product design process and a gender intelligent marketing process, and together that can lead to making products and marketing them effectively to female customers.
Yeah, I thought one of the most interesting, so if we read the report, you'll see, how we're going to scale, and scale has got to be through partnerships. And in our network, for instance, we have 60 very large commercial banks. All of them are working with fintechs, but only 8% of them are actually talking between the women's markets teams in the banks and the people that deal with fintech. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at the report. It's not just partnering between fintechs and banks, it's also partnering between fintechs and community technology organizations that are in the community, working with tens of millions of women already, e-commerce platforms, etc., that can really affect change. Now, as a female founder, one last question if you could wave a magic wand, what would you do to make the fintech sector more gender intelligent?
I think, like you said, I am a female founder as well, so obviously I have a soft corner for female founders, and we saw in the research that of all the fintechs which were catering to the female economy, they were predominantly founded by female founders. But when we asked them that what are your actual constraints, what do you need to grow, most of them said that they feel very constrained because there's not enough investor money flowing into their businesses. They need more partnerships, they need more regulatory grants, they need more accelerators, basically everything, right? The whole ecosystem needs to mobilize to actually shine a spotlight on these female founders and make sure that they have all the resources that they need to be able to cater to the female economy. So my magic wand and my wish would definitely be to make sure that these trailblazers who are female founders catering to the female economy can actually become role models for the entire ecosystem.
That's super interesting. We do have a panel with investors, later on, and I think there is a myopia in the investment community as well. And I wonder, in this partnership space, between why is partnering for fintech so complex with large businesses and vice versa? Do they speak different languages, or what's the challenge?
Oh, absolutely. They definitely speak different languages. And again, I've been on both sides of the equation in a personal capacity as well. So definitely, speak different languages. And like you rightly highlighted earlier, Ines, as well, that specifically in catering to the women's economy, I think most fintechs don't even know that financial institutions actually have women's markets teams, right? Like 60 of your financial institutions, they actually have very active women's market programs. I don't think most fintechs actually even know that, because it's a new concept, right? It's not a concept which every financial institution might have a team like that. And even more importantly, like you said, not enough of the women's markets teams are talking to the teams within the financial institutions which partner with fintechs or work with technology more. So there's a lot of that cross-pollination required between the teams as well, and then for fintechs to be able to work with these teams. And interestingly, in a couple of the next sessions, we'll also hear from platforms like the Apex platform, which are helping simplify this process between banks and fintechs to be able to work and partner up better. So, I think, like I said, the ecosystem is getting mobilized, and hopefully, more fintechs and banks can partner up to serve the women's market more effectively as well.
There's a couple of do we have time for questions, guys, on the Slido? Okay, sure. Okay, so on Slido, and I'd encourage you all please to get on the Slido here. This is probably a little bit controversial. Should regulators make it mandatory for fintechs that are B2C, I suppose, more, but also for B2Bs in terms of encouraging Sexus Aggregator to publish customer data, so that we know and we build some accountability into the system?
Well, Suknindu actually already said that something like that should be done. So I think that'll definitely help, because what we found during the research is that somehow people are not just thinking about it too much, right? Like fintechs use 11% fintechs use gender as a sort of as a variable to do any of their marketing or to do any of their targeting, right? They use things like income, they'll use geography, everything else, but not gender, right? So clearly we found that the more we were talking about it, the more people were saying that yes, we should actually focus on this, and it was like a light bulb moment going in for most of the founders. So I think absolutely it would definitely help.
Not to kind of go into this space where we're saying, it's all about gender diversity and inclusion, but it does seem that some of the dynamic in fintechs is really kind of an accentuation of what's happening in the incumbent sector. Now, as a female founder yourself, how do we get, the survey sample really proved it, right? That there was so few women in the major decision-making roles. And, a lot of people talk about STEM, and it starts with all the education, but there's got to be more than that, right? We can't just, because if it's just not, it's a huge problem if it's education. So don't get me wrong, but are there faster ways of fixing this? Ways to encourage?
I think the more female founders there will be in tech, the better the situation would be. Because again, I can take my personal example and tell you that in my fintech, my tech lead was a male, and I would always say that I want more female developers in the team. I want female product managers in the team, but there'd always be a little resistance, and I had to literally make it mandatory and say that I don't care, but we need more female developers and product managers. So I think STEM and all of those important reasons aside, focus on female founders in tech and especially in fintech would definitely help the whole situation.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks so much, Yosha. I encourage you all to download that report, take a look. We'd love to hear your comments. Please put them into the chat in the on the platform. Thanks, Yosha. Thanks so much for the report. It's been thank you.